Hello. Today, let's talk about what happens when you're stopped by the police. What's the proper thing to do, especially when you're carrying a firearm? So you're driving down the road, everything's wonderful. You look in the rearview mirror and you see blue and red lights flashing behind you, and we all get that nervous energy. Oh Lord, what did I do? Right? Probably know we've gone over the speed limit a little bit. Our heart starts to, palpitate a little bit more. Adrenaline starts flowing. We're really nervous. What's the best way to handle this situation so that not only are you okay, but the officer is okay as well? Because now you've remembered, oh, I've got my firearm with me. So what do we do? As a police officer pulls up, starts to walk towards your vehicle, please have your hands in a place that are, the police officer can see them. I'd obviously recommend on the steering wheel, etc., no sudden moves. But how do you handle that delicate situation of I've got a firearm? So the first thing you really have to be conscious of is, where am I at? What state am I in? There are several states, for example, Ohio, Michigan, a few of your other Midwestern states, that basically say if you're pulled over and you've got your firearm, you have to immediately declare to the officer that, hey, I have a firearm. So when that happens, please do it professionally. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. The proper way would be to say, officer, I'm armed and I have a permit. Don't get nervous and say things like, I got a gun, I've got a gun. That makes officers very nervous. The word gun is almost a word that sends a message to them. So be careful with that word. Again, I have a permit, I'm armed, things along those lines if you're required to do it. Several other states don't have requirements. So, for example, the state of Florida, the state of Georgia, they don't have that requirement that if you're driving and you're pulled over by the police or stopped by the police, that you have to volunteer that information. Now, should you volunteer that information? Let's say you come from one of the Midwestern states and you drive down to Florida. Should you volunteer that information? Again, take this for what it's worth. Don't make that officer uncomfortable. If that officer is in a jurisdiction like Florida, generally people are not telling him that they're armed because, again, it's not necessarily required down in that state. So when you're in Rome, do as the Romans do. There's no duty to disclose. Don't disclose. Now, here's the other key to this. Make sure you follow what the officer tells you to do. It's not the time to argue with the officer. If the officer tells you to do something, do as you are instructed. That's the best thing you can do, because no matter what the right thing is or what rights you feel are violated, that's not the time to fight that fight. The other thing I want to make sure you understand is, if the officer asks you to remove the gun or something along those lines, make sure you make him feel safe. Don't say, here, let me get it out for you. Ask the officer, how would you like me to proceed? He may ask you to exit the vehicle. He may ask you to take it off of you, him or herself, however the officer decides to do that. But please be prepared for whatever they tell you to do. Now, one tip, if you are traveling and you're traveling with your firearm and you're transporting it, which basically means it is in a box that's designed for a firearm, no ammunition in the box or in the firearm itself, and that box is locked, and in the rearmost part of your vehicle, let's assume the trunk or the rear part of your SUV, you're under no duty to tell the police that you have a firearm there. So something just to keep in mind. Again, make sure you're calm with the situation, know where you are. And the best thing I could tell you is find something like our Firearms Legal Protection app. That tells you specifically what state you're in. Is there a duty to inform an officer? Things along those lines. If this has been valuable information for you, please click the subscribe button, tell your friends about us, and we'll see you again soon.